Josh, thanks for joining. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So for people who don't know Josh Mosko, I'll do a quick background. 22 years of equipment, 22 years of experience in the equipment rental space. Currently the VP of Business Development at CES Power, which I learned is the number one HVAC provider for live events in the world. And previously managing director of Logimove, which you sold to Banneker Partners, a private equity group. Founder and CEO of Ford Consulting and Equipment, helping the equipment rental industry. P&L lead role at Herc Rentals and a sales role at United Rentals. I don't know what you haven't done in the equipment rental industry, Josh. Maybe not host a podcast. Maybe that's your last thing.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's been an interesting journey. And like a lot of us in the business, we're all passionate about it. And, once you're in, you don't leave, right?
That's right. Well, I'm only 3 years in, and I like it so far. Part of your bio, you said one of your lifetime achievement or highlights of your, I guess, of your experience has been seeing the 1996 Yankees beat the Braves. I'm in Atlanta, so I think I got to rep the Braves. Who's your favorite Yankees player of all time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Don Mattingly would be, if I had to choose, I think he's the guy. Kind of grew up, in that era, and he kind of checked all the boxes. Good guy, and great hitter, and even though the Yanks weren't good at that time, but yeah, I'd have to say he's the guy.
Yeah, he's a great one.
Yeah.
So we got 4 topics I'm excited to talk about, really around specialty equipment rental today. First question I like to ask everyone, though, is how did you get into the rental industry? What brought you in? I believe United Rentals was your first, foray into the industry. But what brought you into the industry?
Yeah, that's always an interesting question, right? I think if you're not born into the industry, somehow you fumble into it, right? So that's kind of my situation. I grew up in the family business. So my dad had a restaurant. I worked for him for a little bit when I was really young. And I realized that wasn't going to be my passion. That was a tough business.
Yeah.
And my grandfather owned a business as well, electrical wholesale. So I started there when I was like 10 years old. And I always tell the story. It's, interesting. I had this background of kind of hard work ethic. My grandfather, my dad, entrepreneurs, but my grandfather told me, he sat me down in his office. I was 10 years old, and he said, "You're going to learn every aspect of the business, and I'm going to pay you $3 an hour." And I was like, "Wow!" I was 10 years old. I was like, "This is awesome! $3 an hour." Back then, that was some money. So he's like, "You're going to learn every aspect of the business, just like I did, and one day it'll be yours." So I was like, "All right, whatever I need to do." So the next thing you know, he's handing me some pails and some different cleaning supplies, and I'm scrubbing toilets, right? So that was kind of my entree, but true to the word, I did, stocking shelves, inside sales, shipping and receiving, outside sales, kind of went through the gamut. And after I got done with college, I came back and worked for a bit, and was going to school at night for my master's. And that's when kind of the United Rentals guys came in, and they came into our shop, and they were working on a job at Yale, tricentennial job, and they were doing generators. And this was right when United first started out in the generator business. And they said they need a panel, and Yale told them to go visit Josh. So I basically built them a panel over the weekend in my fab shop, and they were really appreciative of kind of going above and beyond. So they were like, you guys, you should come work with us. This is kind of an exciting thing, and we're getting going. So I was like, that's interesting. Kind of wanted to get outside the family business and explore. So I kind of jumped on that opportunity, and it was a couple of young guys, and it was the first branch at United that did, kind of power and eventually HVAC and the specialty side. So it was a really interesting kind of entree into rental. And then, had, like you said, with Hertz, had a lot of time at Hertz, and really learned a lot there as well, and kind of grew into a global role, and had some really good mentors, and worked for ReadyArc for a few years in kind of a global leadership role there as well, and operations and fleet. And that was kind of my entree into welder rental, which I never knew anything about. So a lot of times I kind of pivoted and jumped out of my comfort zone, and, eventually did go into a little bit outside of corporate, went into consulting, and that kind of veered into technology. And that's when I met the founder of Logimove, and we kind of hit it off and saw an opportunity in the equipment rental space, and, went on that journey, and we sold to private equity, as you mentioned. And the opportunity for CES was kind of in parallel with that, coming out of, it was during COVID basically, but we saw the opportunity really to kind of ramp things up as we come out of COVID and live events, and kind of here we are a couple of years later, and it's been, a really great journey, and, never would have forecasted it, but here we are, and it's been exciting and just a great industry and great people.
Yeah, I mean, 22 years, and at $3 an hour for your first job, you're either very hungry or very old. I don't think you're that old. I'll go with hungry to get some work experience. What like tell me a little bit about specialty equipment. A lot of like this theme for today is around specialty equipment. I guess for someone who's just joining, doesn't know what that is. What do you mean by specialty equipment? What's so special about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think everyone has a little bit different definition, right? I mean, I think when you talk about general rentals, I think everyone understands, right? Your aerial and earth moving and various tools, and that's kind of, one-stop shop. When people talk about specialty, it's typically power, it's HVAC, it's pump, it's trench, could be compressors. So everyone's got a little different spin on what their division or what their group is with specialty, but that's typically what we talk about with specialty equipment.
Yeah, we had on Ami Kassar 2 weeks ago talk about, just financing strategies for rental businesses. One of the things he talked about is the niches to riches strategy, where you could pick a niche and dominate that. There's pros and cons. You can also take a broader view. It sounds like you sort of focused on specialty equipment. Was that a conscious decision you made, or how did you get into that?
No, it was really, my entree into United with power, and, we were doing all entertainment at the time. We first started out. So that's kind of was the onset. And like you said, once you kind of pick a niche, and, that's worked kind of well, not that I haven't worked kind of more in the general rentals and corporate and different things, but definitely the specialty has been a really good focus. And, what we've seen over the years is a lot of the big rental companies have really put a lot of money into it because it's highly profitable. ROI, dollar utilization is really good. So the rental businesses in a whole is really kind of embraced the specialty aspect.
And how has the specialty aspect changed in the last 10 years or so? It sounds like maybe the national players are focusing more on that. Like, how do you see that? How's it changed, and where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of it, right? It's been, I mean, if you look at all the quarter results of the big rental companies, they always tout it, right? I mean, massive growth. I mean, United, like I said, we were the first branch, and I think they have over 250 branches just dedicated to kind of power and HVAC now, and do $1 billion, right? So, I mean, it's just been a massive growth for a lot of the big rental companies. It's more about kind of engineering a solution, which is a little bit different, right? A lot of times it's more about kind of a commodity renting a piece of iron, and how do you differentiate yourself? And specialty and engineering a solution has been a part of it. And I would say technology as well, right? And I guess the last piece would be just kind of the rental penetration. I think the equipment's gotten more sophisticated, technology, emissions. So it's a lot harder for a lot of people to kind of own that type of equipment versus rent it. And the equipment rental companies have gotten bigger and better at it, and now just have a massive footprint, right? So you can kind of get it anywhere, in a given market, and all those things combined have just led to massive growth.
Do you feel like the general, more broad use equipment has become more of a commodity then compared to some of the specialized equipment? Is that a fair statement?
Maybe I'm a little biased, but yeah, I do think that. I think obviously with a lot of things, transactional, a lot of metrics in the business, right? So it's a lot more data driven and metrics, and I think ultimately that leads to price sensitivity and just more of a transactional model, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like with any commodity, right, prices become more competitive. It's harder to maintain price leverage on those types of things. I mean, we talked a lot of, at least I did, a lot of small and medium-sized rental companies. And do you have any advice for smaller rental owners in terms of some of these folks are just getting started in terms of fleet mix and thinking about what type of equipment do you buy? Do you go broader? Do you go more specialty? I'm curious how you would think about that, at least giving advice to some of these smaller groups, which I know you used to do in your previous consulting roles.
Yeah. I think a couple of things there. I mean, obviously really understanding kind of the benchmarks and the metrics, and what do other people do? I think that's always important, right? Especially in your given market. So I'd say it depends a little bit on what your market is, right? What's your area? But I think, there's definitely an opportunity to be really good at what you do from a geographic area, right? So service, I think a lot of, as you talk to small and medium rental companies, I'm sure a lot of people say the same. It's really a lot about service, right? Because to be a differentiator from the big guys, you have to really offer that top tier service and kind of go above and beyond. And I think that's what has made a lot of small and medium sized rental companies successful is kind of the service and, the 24/7 support and just, that personal touch. I think that's really key. And then in terms of fleet mix, I think, a lot of it is kind of a little bit, trial and error, right, in your market to see, what's working. Obviously, again, you can see other competitors in your market, see what's working, and get a feel for the seasonality and all those things. But I think a lot of people have learned, how to manage fleet and metrics and things along those lines. And there's a lot of tools out there, right, between ARA and, some industry kind of best practices. So, I think really talking to, some folks had on your podcast before, there's a lot of good mentors out there and a lot of people that are happy to help and share knowledge and best practices. So it's a great time to be a small business owner with all this information out there to kind of capture and utilize.
And that's the thing we've seen from a lot of the guests who've come on is especially for the smaller players around customer service. And that's a way you can win without having to be the low price leader, which sort of seems to be a losing strategy. One of the questions we got from Dustin is what are some of the most significant changes you've seen over your career in the specialty equipment space? Do you think it's still a market that a small independent rental company can enter to diversify fleet and revenue streams?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, the biggest thing is I go back to the metrics. I think when I first started out, there was really no metrics and we'd look out in our yard and it was like a sniff test. Is there anything in the yard? Or if there's nothing in the yard, thumbs up, we're doing good. If there's a lot of stuff in the yard, it's like, oh, we need to get some stuff on rent. So I think the biggest thing has been just the metrics, the data, information, and really kind of managing your business from that standpoint. I think there's a good balance, right? You want to obviously know what's going on in your business and profitability and rental rates and all those things, but obviously there's other factors involved as well. So I think, that's been one of the biggest changes, some other technologies, but I think there is an opportunity. The equipment's typically more expensive, sometimes as you get into some bigger generators and climate control and pumps and stuff like that. But I think, kind of high risk, high reward in a way, right? If you can keep that stuff busy, it can be really profitable. And again, if you have good customer service, I think, you can do well in a market and, then you can kind of crawl, walk, run. I think that's what I've seen some successful small companies do is, start out small with a couple pieces, obviously get everyone trained on it and really, really understand the product and, kind of work with manufacturers to get some training and help. And, you want to be a subject matter expert. I think ultimately, if you can do that, as a business owner or as a salesperson, I think you can really, kind of grow it from there.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be the best at something. We're going to be top 1% and the niche is the richest strategy, which I sort of like from last week. Yeah, and I'm curious, like you mentioned metrics, like as a small rental business owner, and I know you used to work a lot of them, like what are the top couple metrics I'm looking at around fleet utilization to make sure my business and my rental business is running well?
Yeah, I mean, I think pricing, obviously to understand kind of rental rates and get as much information. There's a lot of companies out there that help benchmark and, the Rouses of the world and Pros Pricing and some of those folks. So that's important. I think ultimately, I always think that dollar utilization is king. Time utilization is another one, but ultimately, and I'll go back to specialty, you could have a low time utilization, let's say for air conditioning or heat, something that's seasonal. You could be renting it, 30% of the time and have a high dollar utilization, right? You could have 100% dollar utilization, basically a 1-year payback because, you're renting it in a season and it's, with a good rate. So to me, dollar utilization is really a one. So that's kind of always in the heads up display for me.
Yeah. We've heard that a lot too. I want to move to our next topic, which is M&A strategies that you've seen. I think with CES Power, I think you mentioned earlier, how many acquisitions this year? Nine or so?
Well, in the last 2 years, we've had 8. We're about to announce 9 and 10 by the end of the year. So yeah, it's a lot for kind of our business, and we're doing about one every 60, 75 days right now.
Yeah, that's a lot. What's the typical profile of an acquisition target you guys look at?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely look for a company that kind of fits our core. And when I say core, I mean kind of, in the live event business, right? That's our main focus. So we like to stick to our knitting, culture and, kind of the owners and what it looks like post-transaction is important, their fleet, their relationships, kind of their credibility within the industry. So, we really want somebody that can really kind of be a good partner in the long term. For us, it's really all about the long term. We want a company that's going to add value, and it's got to be a good deal for both sides. So we know a lot of people in the industry, so a lot of it is through relationships. But we've also kind of gone outside a little bit. We've bought a couple technology companies. We did a Wi-Fi and networking deal with CCTV and security cameras. We bought a software company. So, we're trying to kind of expand. I think one of the things that we think about too is how can we get stickier with our customers? And I think one of the things we've seen in the rental world over the years too is just, more of a one-stop shop, right? So, and we have that same idea. We do power and HVAC. Now we do kind of the Wi-Fi networking, other technology solutions. What else can we do from, call it an infrastructure standpoint, to kind of grow our share of the wallet with the customer, get more sticky, and just add value. So it's kind of a combination of things. And then obviously from a geographical standpoint, if there's some markets that we want to be in that we're not in today, it may make sense to kind of look to partner and acquire a company in that market. So we've kind of done a little bit of everything. And, we kind of keep reevaluating as we go.
Yeah. Well, I got some more questions I want to get back to. Another question from the audience, and I think it sort of relates to the vision to be a one-stop shop, as you mentioned, for CES Power. But the question is, do you need to offer all the bells and whistles with special equipment to be successful and grow? For example, I do need to offer all accessories, cables, and electrical services to hook up a generator, or is that normally the renter's responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think, from my perception, you really want to own that cable and distro part of it, right? I think that's, again, what makes a differentiator. A lot of general rental stores have, up to maybe 100 kW generators, don't have a lot of distro. If they do, it's maybe a GFI box for a construction site. But, that's definitely one of the differentiators for us. I mean, we have, 35,000 cable ramps, hundreds of miles of cable, distribution boxes, 1,000 transformers. I mean, just a massive amount of distro. So that really helps us. We offer a turnkey solution, kind of set up, operate, dismantle. So, and it's very profitable too, right? When you're talking about cable and cable ramps and distribution boxes, it's super profitable. So in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense to kind of own that equipment, and it's just kind of upselling and presenting yourself as the subject matter expert. And yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's an option, right? It's an add-on service. If people want the easy route, the easy button, you can offer that, but it's not automatically included. But the key is, like, if you think about customer experience, customer service, you want to be able to offer those things for the customers who want to opt in.
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. And when you add some of these accessories, there's more than one way to skin a cat too, right? So once you become that subject matter expert, you can utilize your fleet different ways. You can set up jobs differently and kind of engineer the solution. So it can be highly utilized and make some good money. So I'm a big proponent.
I always thought that phrase, always, there's more than one way to skin a cat, was always weird to me. I was like, how are the different ways to skin a cat? I don't want to know that. I got another question. A comment from Rebecca. Glad to hear you say that, Josh. I think something you said resonated with Rebecca. Then another question from the audience. Do you see rental companies with special equipment exiting at higher multiples than, quote, traditional equipment?
Yeah. I think historically, the answer is yes. I think, again, going back to the profitability, companies that are acquiring like to see that, right? There's profitability, kind of the upside, the opportunity, the growing market. I think there's a lot of things they like about it. So yeah, historically they trade, at a much higher multiple. What does that mean? Much higher multiple? I don't know. It depends, right? I mean, you see kind of average multiple, maybe 5 to 6 times, maybe specialty could be, 7 times up to 13 times. I think you see that in specialty, and obviously if you have recurring revenue or some software aspect, it's kind of that similar thing where, there's more value with that type of revenue.
Well, it's good advice for any entrepreneurs out there. 5 to 6 times for general equipment, 7 to 13 times for specialty. That sounds like a good business to be in. Can you tell me about some of what goes wrong in a deal? Like, you've obviously made a lot of deals, and you've likely had more success than not. There's a lot of books and articles about acquisitions, and the failure rate's much higher than people sometimes want to admit. When things don't go well with an acquisition, like what typically happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, every situation's different, every circumstance. I think it's a big decision for a lot of folks, right? I think a lot of the companies that are acquired are family businesses, small mom and pops. Obviously, you can get into some larger companies, but it's their life's work, and there's a lot of emotion tied to it. So it could be a multitude of things from that standpoint. I think ultimately a lot of business owners are really concerned about their employees and what's it gonna look like post transaction. What's going to be my role? What's everyone going to be doing? How are we going to integrate into this other company? So I think there's a little bit of a fear factor. I think it's one of the things that we do really well to kind of talk about that, and being a nimble company, we can really be creative. For us, it's really all about people, good people, and capturing and maintaining good people within the company. So it's worked out really well from our standpoint, in terms of, not really having a lot of, bad stories about deals that went wrong. But I think a lot of times it comes down to the owners and, what it looks like post transaction. Are they comfortable? And, so I think there's a lot of, potential roadblocks there, but, I think it's always about communication. And if everyone's aligned going into a transaction, I think, there can be a good output from it. So, I could talk a lot about different aspects of it, but I think, ultimately that's kind of from a high level, that's what I see. It's like, can we align, moving forward or not, right? In terms of where we see the business going, and the owner's roles and key employees. And that's usually when kind of rubber meets the road.
Do you find that owners typically stay involved and engaged several years later, or do they leave? And I just wonder, if you're an entrepreneur, you're an owner, right? You sort of have a way of doing things, and sometimes it's hard to be an employee, I'd imagine. At least, I started a company, so I get that. What typically happens with the owner? Like, have you seen I imagine you've probably seen a variety of things. They stay on, maybe it doesn't work, they leave. Like, what typically happens?
Yeah, I mean, typically, for us, it's all about keeping the owner, right? I mean, we could go out and buy assets. That doesn't excite us, right? We want the people who have made the business successful, and we want the opportunity to help kind of supercharge that. So that's really how we look at it. I mean, typically with some of the deals are, they're locked in type of thing for a few years, and every deal is different, but that's a typical scenario where, the owner stays with the company for a few years and hopefully forever. But, depending on life circumstances and different things, maybe after a few years, they transition and walk away. But, for us, it's really important to retain that and, and hopefully take their business and legacy to the next level. That's super important for us.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're partially buying the people and the team, right? And this is another question we just got from the audience. Have you seen more asset-based acquisitions lately? I know the inventory levels were very low from COVID and general equipment. Was it similar for the specialty equipment manufacturers? And I'll just add my own question to that, is like, if so, like, were you making acquisitions based on just acquiring more inventory, or were you looking more at the whole business and the people and the team?
Yeah, I think there's a couple points there. I think in certain market segments, for instance, we've bought, and this is kind of before the strike happened in film and TV, but we bought a few companies. But we've seen that strike happen, and we've seen some opportunities for asset sales as business has been really tough for film and TV. So that's an example. I think COVID is the same thing. I think in certain markets, there were some challenges and some debt in some businesses, and some opportunities there. But yeah, back to what I was saying. I mean, for us, it's really about buying the team and relationships and kind of the upside. So there is the opportunity to buy some asset-based companies. Maybe that's accretive to your business. We've seen obviously a lot of challenges with OEMs and lead times. So I think, in the right scenario, it makes sense, right? Your lead time is really long to buy equipment. So maybe it makes sense to acquire a company that has assets and existing business. And, whether you pay a little bit of goodwill or a lot is obviously, each deal is different.
Yeah, I mean, one of our customers was acquired by a top five player a year ago, and a lot of their uh, attractiveness to the market was that they had purchased a lot of equipment before COVID, and they had it, and it was sort of a fleet based deal, and there was an underlying business that was strong, but like the driver was acquiring the fleet. It sounds like for you guys though that can be important, but a lot of it's really just around the whole team and the business and the relationships. You're buying a business and a company more so than the assets. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think there's certain businesses that I've learned. I mean, maybe more than others are super relationship dominant, right? And I think live events is one, right? I mean, we're doing mission critical events, Super Bowl type, Taylor Swift concert tours.
That's a big deal. Taylor Swift concert. I mean, don't let the lights go out for that.
Yeah, exactly. So, those are the type of events we're doing, right? Broadcast, different music festivals, Coachella and the like. So, from that standpoint, it's super important to, basically with relationships, right? Rolling Stones goes out on tour, they're calling our sales guy. Like it's that, years and decades of relationships that kind of foster that. So, and then it gets away from price a little bit, right? If somebody comes in and says, yeah, we'll do it for 30% cheaper, who's going to stick their neck out to, like you said, Taylor Swift lights go out. Like that's a big problem, right? So yeah, I mean, I think, every industry is slightly different. I think oil and gas is another one, super, relationship oriented, service oriented. So I think as you start to look at different products and market segments, relationships are really key. So for us, credibility, all those things, you only get kind of that, first chance at that initial relationship with the customer, and you really want to put your best foot forward. So you don't want to kind of dilute your brand and your company and, your subject matter expertise.
Yeah. Well, I would not want a legion of Swifties mad at me. So it's a good quality, charge a price. Dustin wants to know, did your people get $100,000 bonuses like all of Taylor's drivers did? LOL. So
yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to say or not, but yes, there's a lot of people that I know that did. And it's just amazing, right? That somebody would kind of offer that. That's unprecedented. And she's going out on tour next year. So, that's just great, life-changing money for a lot of folks. So I really applaud that. And, I guess it speaks to her character.
yeah, I've not typically been a huge Taylor Swift fan, but I went and saw the movie with my wife, and she's the GOAT in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Sure, your wife made you go. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. I've got two girls. I'm a girl dad. It's sort of, I had to, anyways. All right. I want to move to our third topic, technology. And I think your background is interesting. You've sort of, obviously worked in smaller rental companies, bigger rental companies. You've also run a technology business in the rental industry. So, I guess my question is thinking about the importance of technology in rental businesses and really around some of the things you see happening in 2024, 2025 in terms of technology adoption. I know we've talked about solar and battery storage, hybrid equipment, IoT, software. There's a lot we could talk about, but maybe at a high level, talking about technology adoption in the rental space.
Yeah, like you said, there's definitely a lot of topics to talk about. I think with products, obviously we've seen emissions and controllers and, like you said, battery, solar, alternative energy, all sorts of stuff, right? So sustainability is a big topic, a lot of things from a product standpoint. We've seen telematics and kind of IoT, a lot of iterations of that. I mean, we started with that 20 years ago, spent a lot of time with that. It's an asset heavy industry, right? It's very expensive, capital intense. It's very important to protect the assets and kind of know what's going on with the assets. So telematics is obviously, one of those things that keeps getting traction and growing from that standpoint. And then obviously we have the software and everything going on with software. And now AI is the buzzword. And, we did that a few years ago in our software company with damage detection and things along those lines. So I think, with folks like yourself, Kyle, and, from the software standpoint, there's a lot of opportunities, right? There's a lot of legacy systems. There's a lot of things out there where there's gaps in technology. right? As we look at our business today, we're going through some of those changes now. We look at our workflow and our processes, and we look at the technology we have, and we realize there's gaps, right? How can we do it better, faster, cheaper, enhance the customer experience? So I think, yeah, software is a big one, right? With, whatever that looks like, with integrating into ERP systems or standalone or website asset management systems. I think, there is a new generation that's ordering equipment, right? I think we've seen, Big Rents and some other companies kind of aggregate, do some different things. Used sales is now a big one too. You see, the booming buckets and dozers and Equip Hunter, and a lot of companies kind of coming up doing that. So I think there's a lot of aspects of the business, day-to-day business, whether it's, running an operation, checking in, checking out equipment, selling e-commerce. I think there's a lot of options and a lot of good tools out there. It's just, really understanding what's a good fit for your business and, what makes sense maybe in the short term and long term. But it's an exciting time. And I think companies are finally spending money on technology. It's taken a while. We're really kind of behind a lot of other industries, but, there's a real opportunity. And I think people who embrace it and or kind of blaze the trail, it may take some time, but I think ultimately they're the winners in the end.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what you said earlier around taking the long view. Like, the technology investments you make, they're not going to pay off in 2 weeks. But long term, they can compound. This non-linearity thinking, right? It's actually can compound and sort of escalate. Obviously, that's what I think. I've been in technology for 10 years. You're a technology person as well. I'm curious in your thoughts on just like AI in rental software in the rental industry. Something I've been thinking a lot about. I've always sort of been skeptical around like crypto and NFT and all these other things, but like AI, I use it every day, the ChatGPT and other things. But curious, like opportunities you see to leverage this amazing new technology, right? I think like the internet, then you had the smartphone, and then AI seems to me like it could be the next pillar. Have you thought about how rental companies can use AI in their business and how to make things run better customer experience, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And, I think, time will tell a little bit from that standpoint on, not just the technology. I think we can think about some really cool stuff that it could do, but, how do we integrate that into our day-to-day business and offer that? I think, there are things from the standpoint of, what we worked on with damage detection and kind of AI, picture recognition, how it left versus how it came back, and, being able to capture damage and stuff like that. I thought, that's a real interesting problem to solve. I think, listening to some of the other podcasts out there, I think a lot of people, the theme is, if there's a problem out there, how do you solve it? And I think, we can look to AI to maybe solve some problems and make it, streamline some things and make things more efficient. I do also think there's an opportunity, there's not a lot out there. I've been thinking about this for years now, but like I said, we're been super focused on the equipment and technology. Now we're starting to get a little bit more focused on the people in terms of the workforce and, how do you take all that data and make it actionable? That's always been a big thing for me. So now we get into mobility. That was our business at Lodge and Move, kind of mobility. How do you do something with a smartphone or a tablet? So I think there's a lot of things from an AI standpoint that you can do, whether it's service and equipment, you're out in the field, just knowing a problem's going to happen before it happens, a lot of predictive stuff. I think there's just a multitude of things from just a workforce standpoint that AI could solve. And I think that's probably a needle mover and where things could go. And then to your point about customer experience, I think there's a lot of things around that in terms of just, when customers are in the field with a machine and different interactions with the machine, I think there's a lot of things that AI can solve as well. So, it's hard to really define, but there's a lot of opportunity. And since we're behind as an industry in some of those technology areas, I think, it's going to be really cool to see what comes about.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I think the rental industry is ranked 48 out of 49 industries on technology adoption, something like that. And like we started quickly 3 years ago on e-commerce, which is like 10, 15 years later than it should have been. And that was still sort of novel. And, we're sort of dipping our toes with AI. Like, we onboard a lot of customers and we have to write product descriptions. So we've been using ChatGPT to help write more detailed product descriptions that hit certain keywords. And, we're just sort of testing things, and I haven't heard a lot of people with real use cases in the rental industry yet, but I think it's a matter of time. And I also didn't realize that at Logimove, you guys are using AI for damage detection. It sounds like. What do you have any success stories or metrics that show that the AI tool you were using was actually driving real business value?
Yeah. There's a couple things there. I think, we originated in the car rental industry, which I really equate to our industry as kind of similar.
Mhm.
They're a little bit ahead of us from a technology standpoint. So we learned a lot of lessons there. So some of the big car rental companies, Hertz and Six and Europe Car and all that were our customers. But yeah, that was kind of our first entree into it in terms of learning kind of some of the metrics and the pain points. So in the car rental industry, it's like $800 of damage is the average damage. And they have two metrics, damage detection and damage collection.
Mhm.
And they were about, 4% damage detection and 2% damage collection. And as we implemented the AI and what we call, some of the damage detection stuff, it kind of doubled overnight, right? Just by going through the workflow and the processes and, having that in place, and all that money drops to the bottom line. So we then brought it into some of the big rental companies, and it was, took a little time to go through some piloting and different things. Obviously, it's one thing to do it with a car. You may care about a scratch on a car, but you don't care about a scratch on a bulldozer. So, we really had to do some development and tweaking and do some things in terms of what was important to see from a damage standpoint, right? And how do you change the tolerance? So anyways, I won't get into the geeky technical stuff, but, basically we were able to capture, minimum of 40% more damage than the field worker, whether it was a driver or a technician, whoever was checking in that equipment. But, the big part too was that now we had, basically checking out, you had pictures, checking in, you had pictures. So you had some comparables. So a lot of it was the process, and then you overlay the technology and it just makes it better. Right. So that was, I think that's a real opportunity. The average damage that we saw, and this is over millions of transactions for equipment rental companies, was $1,600 per damage. Right.
Mhm.
So, you can talk about some big damages with some excavators and things that are, big dollars, right? But the net was $1,600 per damage. So substantial, right? And if you have a lot of branches, you add a few damages, recouping a few damage for each branch, it's just a monster number, right? So yeah, I think there's really, some opportunity there, some accountability. And I think customers are, kind of really understand it, right? In terms of, if I return a car that I rented and I smashed it up, I'm going to expect to pay some damage for it, right? And in our industry, maybe you get charged, maybe you don't, maybe 2 out of 10 times somebody notices. It's so I think there's been a big gap. So I would say that that's my experience there. And I did have something else pop up in my head about another AI use case that we're working on today, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. You said you increase like detection of damages by 40% using AI. Like that's what I'm excited about. Like there's got to be processes and things that are being done every single day in a rental company that with layering on AI, can you get 40% more efficient? Like setting, data analysis, setting rates. Is there like a chat GPT function on a customer's website where you can interact and sort of, in real time get recommendations on a rental? There's probably a dozen things we could rip off, but that's what I'm personally excited about in the next few years is sort of taking like a core system and then layering on AI in certain use cases. And if you can just find one that increases something by 40%, that's a home run, right?
Yeah. And I think, I'd be remiss if I didn't say too, one of the things I think that's interesting is from a safety perspective.
Yeah.
I think, we all care about safety. I think AI could really help from a safety standpoint. I mean, we have a software and we do all sorts of things to figure out loads of equipment, our generators and HVAC and all sorts of things. But there's a safety aspect too that can be leveraged with AI and face recognition and, all sorts of things. So I think, that's a big one. We talk about sustainability, we talk about safety. There's obviously a lot of customer enhancements, stuff like that. But I think those are ones that we'll start to see, catch on a bit too.
Yeah. We got another question from the audience, sort of shifting gears a little bit, but what's the best advice you could give to aspiring entrepreneurs or business leaders that are starting out in a niche market or specialty industry, especially as these sectors continue to undergo the tech transformations that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think, like I said, some of your former guests have said it well in terms of just going out in the marketplace, talking to folks, right? Talking to potential customers, people in the industry, semi-competitors, manufacturers, whatever it is, what are the pain points out there? What's the gaps? What are the opportunities, strengths, kind of do that SWOT analysis. But I think it is super important to just get out there and really understand it in a field level. And I think you'll understand where the niche and opportunity is, from a product standpoint and how to deliver that service. Once you find out what are the hot buttons and where you can add value. I think, for me, from a sales standpoint, it's always been about how can I add value. And I think once you understand that dynamic, you can really figure out how to deliver, that product and service and at the right price at the right time. I think that's important though.
Sounds like your advice would be just get out, talk to customers, which, 20 years ago when you're starting, it would have probably been the same advice. There's no smartphone, there's no AI. It was, let's go talk to customers, right? It sounds like things change, but some things don't change. And it's really just around spending time with your customers, understand their pain points, understand what's happening. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's no way to get around that. I think you can enhance that with some of the social media and, and obviously what we're doing today and, with an audience and different things. I think,
We're still talking. We're still talking though.
yeah, exactly. We're still talking. I think there's just different medias where, you can work, smarter, not harder. Right. So I think, there's some opportunities there and getting some data and information, but I think, ultimately it's, you do need to kind of bootstrap it and kind of get out there. I think that needs to be part of the equation.
Yeah, we had Elliot on. He's a sales consultant in the rental industry, and someone asked, like, how do I, should I spend more on marketing? How do I grow? I want to grow my rental business. And he was like, honestly, like, just draw a 5 mile radius from your location and just go drive around and visit every job site, and like just show up, talk to them, invite them over for a barbecue. Yeah, like there's all these sophisticated strategies we can talk about, but a lot of it's just getting out there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally agree. 100%.
I want to shift to our last topic here, which I think is interesting. We talked about technology and all those other things, but I want to talk about your experience a long time ago with the national rental players. And I think you've obviously worked at Hertz, United. Curious, as you reflect on your time there, what are some of the key lessons you learned that have sort of been instrumental to your success in other places?
Yeah, I think, there was a lot there in terms of processes, right? We talked about metrics. I think, that was really important just to understand how to read a P&L and a balance sheet and really understand kind of, a lot from, I learned a lot through osmosis for finance and, all sorts of different things, right? We had a lot of data for different markets, for pricing, for used sales. So I think a lot of that was super helpful just to understand the market, understand a lot of things about the rental business. So, I mean, that's one big thing. I think, there was a lot of positives and programs that they offered as well for leadership and, mentoring and different things. So, I had some really good bosses and mentors, and, that really helped me to kind of grow and kind of navigate. And I think, you also, like anything else, I think you learn what works well and what doesn't work, right? In terms of big rental companies, I think they do some things really well. And I think sometimes they're too big to be nimble and be able to be agile and do some different things. So I think it taught me a little bit of both about, what to take from that experience. But it was, really interesting in, being in a lot of different ability to have a lot of different market segments. You're taking part in, oil and gas and utility and restoration, emergency response. There's just a lot of opportunities. And, it also taught me how to focus a little bit, right? In terms of, meeting goals and numbers and being pretty rigid from the standpoint of what's your business plan. And, so again, some pros and cons with that, but I think, it definitely taught me some things in kind of that corporate business world, and to take some of the things with the small rental companies and different things. And, you combine, I equate it to kind of parenting or anything. Now you learn what your parents did well and maybe not did so well, and you try to carry that on and as a parent, right? So it's got a similar, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that work at the national player, you learned a lot about sort of rigor, discipline, finance, metrics, sort of just like the cadences of an organization and what that looks like. What do you feel like you learned at some of your smaller organizations?
Yeah, I think, just how to be creative, right? How to, have flexibility and be creative and learn how to scale a business, right? I think, super important and, learning how to build teams and, really utilize whatever resources you have, right? And then, maybe how to find some new resources, I think is, we talk about startups and capital and various things, having access to that is super important too, right? Or if you don't have access to it, how do you get it? And I think the other part would be as a small company, and if you're looking to be acquired at some point, you kind of know the recipe of the big rental companies, what they're looking for. Donald spoke well about it, I think a couple of episodes ago, but really how to kind of package that up and think about an exit strategy at a future event.
Yeah, and if there's, one thing a small rental company needs to know who does, aspire to have an acquisition at some point, what would you say? You've obviously bought a lot of them recently. Like what piece of advice would you give them as they start thinking about an exit in the next several years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, based on what your timeline is, right? If there's a horizon, 3 years, 5 years, you start to think backwards, kind of reverse engineer, how do you want to grow your business and scale it within that time, right? With whatever tools and capital and all those things. So I think, that's the first part is just look big picture and then, kind of craft it from there. Obviously, you want to be as profitable as possible, really, having the right fleet mix, having your systems in check, and maybe, really hiring somebody that whether it's a consultant or, kind of work with somebody that can help guide you in some of those decisions in terms of, whether it's tax or whether it's lawyer, different aspects of it. I think it's important because when you do get to a scenario where you're talking to somebody about being acquired, you really want to have all your ducks in a row and you want to maximize your value. So I think it's important to start that path, as soon as possible and then figure out, what your goals are, right? And where you can move the needle and, just kind of maximize your value. I mean, it's kind of a high level response, but I think, it's super important. There's a lot of nuances within there, within that. But, I think you have to start somewhere and, and that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah. And I think it sort of adds on to what Donald was talking about of, really got to have your books in order. Don't just send out like crazy spreadsheets like that it doesn't matter what the underlying business is, that will, hurt your, future sale price in a sense. And having accountants, lawyers, getting everything tight is, can be worth its weight in gold. Yeah. Two final questions as we wrap up here. One, I'm just curious, thinking about the rental outlook for 2024, at least in specialty equipment. Like, what are you seeing in the market? What's your sort of expectations as we head into next year?
Yeah, from a high level, we just had a board meeting last week and super excited about 2024. I mean, I think things are really coming together. Supply chain is not as constricted as it used to be, so more access to equipment. We're seeing huge demands, right? It's going to be a record year for us for concert tours next year, music festivals, a lot of stuff we do. Olympics in Paris next year just takes a massive amount of gear. So, now that we're doing stuff in Europe, there's only so much gear to go around. Euro 2024 in the US, all the politics and elections and stuff like that. For us, that's a big opportunity. So again, takes up a lot of gear and people. So I think from a demand standpoint, we're seeing a really strong 2024. And, so we're trying to position ourselves and have the right fleet and people and everything in place and systems. So yeah, it's going to be a big year in 2024. And I think that just kind of cascades to everyone within specialty. If you talk to people, even the big rental companies, they're really tight on equipment currently, right? It's just, in this time of year, it's not typically the response you're going to get. But so I think utilization is really strong and it's just setting up for just a monster of a 2024.
Yeah, it's exciting. You're going to get to the Olympics next summer?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'd like to. I've never really spent time in Olympics, so that would be one of those bucket list type of scenarios I'd like to be a part. So yeah.
Yeah, well, there's I think golf's an Olympic sport. So you can take out your 9 iron. But final question. I'm just on a personal note. Like, what are you excited about in the next year in terms of new projects, new challenges, and work? Like, what are some things on the horizon for you that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think some of the stuff we talked about a little bit with sustainability and battery and solar are exciting to me. I think that is the future. Whatever that looks like. I mean, there's some hydrogen generators out there, propane, some hybrids. A lot of different kind of configurations, but I think that's really interesting to me. Combining all that technology with software and stuff like that's exciting to me. We're just seeing just a huge growth in live events, fan experience. We do the Sphere in Vegas, stuff like that. I mean, it's just amazing, right? You2 perform there. We do all the F1, we do PGA, we do live golf. I mean, there's stuff out there in the sporting world that's new and exciting. It's kind of transformational. So for me, that's exciting. And then just the global side for me has always been exciting. I spent some time on the global front for a bunch of years, and excited to be back doing stuff globally. And so that's really exciting for me personally. But yeah, there's a lot of things to like, and definitely excited about the future.
Yeah, 2024 should be a great year in terms of events and a lot of cool stuff you're involved with. Last question: how can people get in contact with you? Add you on LinkedIn or email? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of LinkedIn. I think, spend a good amount of time there, but always, email, text, whatever. I mean, definitely like to network. That's always been, fun for me. And like I said, we talked about in the beginning, I think when people are hopping on, we'll be at PowerGen and ARA, and we have a show at Rock Lit. It's coming up in a little bit here. We're a title sponsor. So a lot of trade shows we're looking at 2024, and yeah, definitely like to connect with people and just chat about, all things rental and specialty.
Yeah, sounds good. We just dropped your LinkedIn link in the chat for anyone who wants to add you. And yeah, we'll be at the ARA show in New Orleans, February, Josh. Look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, love it.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Thanks for joining. See you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it.